I want to thank Dustin Moskovitz, who has for several years been one of my favorite people in Silicon Valley, and I think one of the most underrated entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. And
Thank you, Sarah.
as he's asked me to call him all night long, the world's youngest billionaire.
Yeah, not quite yet.
Yeah, you're about to get richer, but we can't really talk about that very much. But I think it's going to be a good month for you.
Yeah, it's already
We've
been
got
quite a good month, actually.
Pando Monthly.
Yes, exactly.
Some other stuff happening.
Yep.
So I know that everyone feels like they know the story of the early days of Facebook. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, most people are taking that from a award-winning movie that was not entirely accurate.
Sure.
So I want to spend a little bit of time back in the dorm room. How did you and Mark meet?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of an interesting story, but Mark and I were pseudo-randomly paired together as roommates. So basically, what happened is when you're a freshman at Harvard, you're in the freshman dorms, and then you enter the lottery system to choose your house for the next 3 years, and it's kind of a big deal. And I ended up, how does this go? I ended up just choosing to block with my girlfriend at the time, and she had a group of friends that she was walking with, and Mark ended up. My memory is actually a little faulty on this, but I think what happened is actually I was in one blocking group and Mark was in another, and basically Billy, the one of our roommates that doesn't often come up in the story, he was rooming with me, and then Chris Hughes was with Mark, and they put us into a 4-room suite, and that's basically how we met. So I literally met Mark the first day of sophomore year, and yeah, the rest was just kind of fate.
What did you think of him when you first met him?
When I first met him, he was definitely, an interesting character. He had a ton of energy. He was, it was the first day of school, so he was really excited, of course. And one of the things that, stands out in my mind, and actually I think is the way David Kirkpatrick decided to open the Facebook effect, is the story about how he had this giant whiteboard with him. That I think was in his parents' van, and it was like the very first thing we moved into the suite, and it was must have been like 4 by 10 feet or something like that, and in a very small college suite. So we had kind of a hallway connecting our bedrooms, and this was like the whole hallway. And yeah, I mean, we hit it off right away, and he's very personable and easy to go along with, and started off an exciting year.
Mm-hmm. So in the early days when you guys first started working on this thing, I mean, were you thinking, as soon as I get out of Harvard, I want to start a company? Were you on that entrepreneur path? Was it something you had thought about? Were you one of those kids in college who sat in the back of the room reading TechCrunch then and hopefully Pando Daily now and wanting to start a company and just kind of biding your time and throwing stuff out, or did it just happen?
No, I don't think that's I don't think that would be an accurate way to describe me. So I was kind of on the business track in school. I was actually an econ concentrator at Harvard. And I was also involved in a lot of technology. I built some websites in high school. I was a user assistant at school, so that meant I helped students with their personal computing issues. And I had always sort of fantasized of something along the lines of being the business side of a technology company. But I don't think I ever really pictured it as founding a company, being the entrepreneur. That wasn't really my mindset, and was much less popular at the time in general. Was TechCrunch even around in 2004 or
2005?
2005. Oh, there you go.
I forgot how young you are.
Yeah. So a lot less of that community was around. I will say that was definitely the way Mark thought about things, and he always had a couple projects going on the side, and made quite a bit of money in high school, even doing large websites and things like that.
I think there was a picture in the insert on the first book of you and Mark and Chris Hughes in a dorm room, like cuddled under a blanket, and you all look about 12 years old.
I remember that picture very well. It actually has a really funny backstory. This came up, somebody sent me this on Facebook message, and I remembered when we took it, and literally, somebody wanted to take a photo of us, and we were like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if we put a blanket over ourselves? And I'm like, won't this picture come out goofy? And sure enough, it's the only picture of all of us from back then, so it gets printed over and over again.
Right.
Yeah.
What was the dynamic like between the three of you? Because you and Mark and Chris are all very different personalities.
Yeah, it's true. I think we got along, really well. Considering that, it just seemed to be a really easygoing relationship. I was always, pretty focused on the sort of the immediate needs of the site, and especially back in the early days, expanding to other colleges. And Chris and Mark were, more off sort of pontificating about what could be and thinking about other businesses back then. And it felt very fluid. And we've continued to have a really great friendship ever since then.
Mm-hmm. Every time I've talked to you, going back to, I think around the David Z $500 million valuation deal, you've always been a big believer that Facebook would be a big company. Even when other people in the company were like, Jesus, David Z, it's a $500 million valuation. There's no way in hell he's ever going to get that money back.
Right.
How far back did that go? I mean, since I've known you, you've always had a big belief, but there had to be a time you didn't.
I think my belief was always quite large, but it got bigger over time. I was always just sort of 1 or 2 years ahead of everyone else.
Okay.
The sort of first week of Facebook at Harvard was really quite incredible. It was just complete ubiquity, literally on every screen as you walked around, and so that gave me just a lot of confidence, and sort of put the big idea in my head. And there's a passage in the Facebook effect about Mark and I negotiating my compensation, and I very distinctly remember saying something to him along the lines of, I think if you give me 1% of this company, that would probably end up being well more than enough, but it wouldn't quite feel fair. So we ended up coming up with something else. But I think that speaks to how I was valuing the company at day 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then when you guys decided to move to Palo Alto, not everyone involved with the company did.
That's correct.
What did you have any? I mean, you ostensibly worked very hard to get into Harvard. Mm-hmm. Did you have any trepidation about leaving?
Well, when we left, we actually weren't permanently leaving. At the very beginning, we were kind of just going for the summer, and then I think maybe the first week or two we were out there, we realized it was going to take longer than that, and it would be impossible to run the company while we were also going to school. I don't know how we thought that was ever going to work.
Harvard is a slightly challenging school.
Yeah, it's slightly challenging. We had managed to do it for 3 or 4 months, so we thought,
what were your grades like?
Can't get any harder than that. They're pretty good most of the days.
That's just annoying. I was hoping you were going to be a D student. Let's try that again. What were your grades like?
Well, one thing that I think will be heartening to people is, I ended up taking Intro to Computer Science the fall before we started Facebook.
Wow.
And part of my rationale was I knew Mark was a pretty good programmer, and I was like, oh, he'll help me with my homework and stuff like this. That turned out to not be true at all. The one time this happened in college was that course. I got a B+.
Wow. It would still be a better story if it were a D.
Well, yeah, it wasn't quite a D, but I was very heartbroken by it at the time, and still managed to.
So your worst grade at Harvard
it.
was Intro to Computer Science.
Exactly. I just find that really ironic.
There's one of my writers writing that right now into WordPress.
Probably. Yeah, I don't think I've ever said that one before, but now it's out there.
But so, you were obviously quite studious. So. Mm-hmm. You just were, but when you got here, you were just bitten by it. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were sort of caught in a wave of momentum, to say the least. I mean, the site was just growing so fast. We honestly weren't even thinking quite that far ahead. It was more like, how do we keep things running? How do we, prevent a competitor from overrunning us? And really, especially for the first 12 months of the site's existence, just how do we make it not go down?
Right.
It's just like all scaling.
Right. And so, but it was an interesting time because while you guys had all this heat and you were near Stanford, and so you kind of were around people who were consuming it, the Valley generally was very bearish on the web at that point. And there were a lot of people who were like, still in this sort of Friendster overhang, and MySpace has already won that. So what did you encounter being in Silicon Valley and trying to build a social media company in those early days?
I mean, I may have been, to a large part, just sort of like insulated from from that kind of attitude.
To side up.
Yeah, I mean, I was really, much more so than Mark or Chris or Sean, really, focused on the product and focused on building. So I didn't get out of the house much, and TechCrunch wasn't around, so I wasn't seeing all the bad things they might have been saying about us. Yeah, there was definitely, some pessimism and some people who believed, and the people closest to users of the site, really kind of got it. It was really hard to sort of ignore the depth to which people were engaging with the app, and I think that ultimately made believers out of people, including, Peter Thiel and later David Z.
Mm-hmm. What do you think was the influence of people like Peter and Thiel and Peter and David on the company? And I mean, even, I think Sean's been talked about a lot, but even Sean, people always, as it said on the site, Mark Zuckerberg production in the early days, and typically the founder gets a lot of credit, but what are some of the untold stories of impact people had that they didn't get credit for?
I think especially with Sean and in turn with Peter, they just had a big effect on our ability to control the company. So I think if we had kind of gone into fundraising without Sean by our side, we would have taken a radically different looking deal, given up a lot more control, probably would have given up control of the board in the first round.
Right.
Just because we were novice entrepreneurs and didn't know better and didn't know how to run a company. But having them on board both gave the confidence to other people that this was a serious company and can be run well, and they were just enormously founder friendly, especially after the experiences Sean had gone through with Napster and Plaxo. He just cared a lot about making sure Facebook stayed in control, especially in Mark's control, but company controlled. And Peter was more than happy to feel the same way. That's how they basically do every deal at Founders Fund now. Mm-hmm. And then for Peter at the board level, one of the things that really sticks out for me is just every single board meeting, he was really emphasizing that we needed to grow the company slower. He always felt like the head count was going too quickly. And I only feel even stronger about that now, especially as we build Asana. It's something we talk about all the time. It's just really easy when you're caught up in this sort of fast user growth to just get in this mindset that you need to hire as quickly as possible. There's so many things falling apart. There's so many opportunities you could be trying, and you just got to hire anybody who walks in the door. And aside from intrinsically meaning that ends up lowering your quality bar because you just can't hire well at scale. It also means you end up with mission creep and mission dilution and culture dilution and just a bunch of people that don't necessarily think about the company the same way the earlier people do. So now I definitely I think about this all the time. This is the number one advice I give to entrepreneurs if they're going to be in that type of market. Really hire slowly and carefully. And I definitely think we probably hired at Facebook much faster than Peter would have wanted us to, but if he hadn't have been there, we would have hired way, way faster than that.
Right. That's interesting. I think that one thing that people always admire about Facebook, and I think is really one of these sort of core things about the Facebook mafia, is this real emphasis on pacing, and not being in a rush. I mean, Facebook started with Harvard and then other Ivy League colleges and then high school. And it's like this kind of big walled garden slowly got out to sort of encompass the rest of the web.
Sure.
And you guys took a very long time launching Asana. You wrote a lot of back-end stuff to run it. I mean, you took a lot longer than it needed to. I think the Quora guys, Path took a long time, and this is sort of this common trend. Is that part of the same thing that was Peter's advice, or was that just what you guys did at Facebook because servers and cost and expanding college to college was such a toll?
Yeah, it wasn't even necessarily cost, but definitely just our ability to re-engineer the site and literally rack servers fast enough at Facebook was definitely the limiting factor. I remember there was one time we decided to like double the number of servers from like 20 to 40, and we're like, okay, now we'll be able to expand as fast as we want, and we put the servers in, made the site run faster, and people just used it more, and we were immediately at capacity again. So we did this, must have done this 2 or 3 times, and then when the school season was starting, all the sort of pre-frosh wanted to get on there, and they were using it really heavily. And they just, time and again sort of exceeded our expectations on how much hardware we needed to solve the problem. And honestly, if AWS had been around, Amazon Web Services, I think we would have done it a lot faster. It was really just this, 2-month delay on making a server order and getting them physically shipped and racking them and configuring them. And nowadays at Asana, we'll do this the day before a press cycle. We'll add web servers to the tier, and we'll just over provision because it's easy to take them back out when you're done, and it makes it a lot easier to deal with things like that.
So how would that have changed Facebook though? I mean, do you think there was something important about that pacing and about that restriction, or just would have grown faster and everything would have been great?
I debate this all the time with people. It's really hard to know.
Which side do you take?
Yeah, I kind of take the side that it would have just grown faster. There's a distinct possibility that other people would have noticed sooner and sort of turned around and decided we were a threat and paid attention, and it ended up taking 3 or 4 years for that to happen. And that's the one thing that I think might have gotten in our way, but I don't fully buy into the idea that the closed community was kind of like a secret sauce of it. I think just compared to the other social networks at the time, it functioned better, and the pages loaded in less than 20 seconds.
Right.
Helps a lot.
We're still sort of working on that on our blog.
Sure.
Kind of a problem. So you mentioned board control, which is obviously something that was really important for Facebook because there was this huge, I think company-defining moment when Yahoo offered Facebook $1 billion. Tell us about that time at the company.
Sure. Yeah, I think that was a valuable lesson for all of us. I think the sort of number one mistake that we made then was sort of entertaining the idea at all that we were planning to sell, because we never really wanted to, and we kind of got caught up in this this mindset that it's foolish not to see what's out there, not to see what the safe route looks like. And then you kind of get pot committed in a way, and you've set expectations with people, and then the other people who didn't feel the way we did got to see what the safe route looked like, and some of them were thought about the company in much more conservative ways, and large part of the market was bearish, and so it just became this enormous pressure from people. Like I said, I was always thinking sort of a year or two out on how I valued the company. So I was like, billion, of course we can do better than that. And everyone else was like, that's crazy. Like,
so you'll never get there. There was not a moment of hesitation of, shit, that's $1 billion. We should take this.
Maybe.
You didn't have like a chalet pass through your head or a sports car.
Yeah, I mean,
sports car guy.
A lot of it just had to do with, for me and definitely for Mark, everything he says, it just wasn't about the money. It was about, making that product and making it big. And we spent a lot of time thinking about, well, can we do that better at Yahoo? What are the advantages of that distribution? Right. So we.
I'm gonna answer for the crowd. I'm gonna answer for the world. No.
Yeah. It was a little more ambiguous back then. Now it's very, very clear.
You could have sued a lot of people for patents.
Right. Exactly. It was a little ambiguous then, but the track record of fast growth startups being acquired by companies and then doing something better after that is basically non-existent. And so, it was really about the mission, and would acquisition make us succeed in the mission? No.
What percentage of the company, or maybe the management team, do you think agreed with you and Mark?
Other than Mark and I?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to name names, but I'd say 20%.
20%?
Yeah.
Not counting you and Mark.
Not counting Mark and I. But luckily, Mark and I counted for a lot. Or maybe we'll call it 30%. Depends who you're thinking of as in the management team.
Right. So what happened to that 70 to 80%? Once you guys said no.
What's that?
Once you said no.
Well, to their credit, I think every one of them, basically said, I think you're making the wrong decision, but this is your company, and we're going to support you, and now we're going to, build something bigger. Mm-hmm. There was definitely, it definitely made things more stressful because, then if you lose, you kind of squandered that. But, again, it was about sort of maximizing the big outcome, not guaranteeing the payday.
So do you think Instagram should have sold for $1 billion?
Yeah, I think this is one of the ones I have to stay away from.
I just thought of
that was a tricky.
I didn't even have it on the notepad.
Yeah.
I feel a lot of pressure because your fiance told me in the green room that she used to be a reporter at the Wall Street Journal, and she was talking about you on Disrupt, and she was like, well, as a former reporter, I thought it was a pretty good interview. And so I was like, oh, shit. And so it just suddenly put all this pressure on me. So that one was for her. It was my gotcha reporter question.
Okay. Nailed it.
So getting back to this whole selling, not selling thing, we've talked about this a lot, sort of in the rubric of how this is the impact this made on other people there. We talked about this a couple months ago on the stage with Dave Morin when we were talking about his decision not to sell to Google, and I know that he says you were one of the only people on his side then too. How was that different? Because Path certainly didn't have the amount of engagement or heat that Facebook did.
Yeah, I do think there's very different rationale there. I always like to point out, people like to give me a lot of credit for backing Dave there, but Brian Singerman was also very much at the table with us and having the same conversation, was super supportive of Dave, and I think again that just speaks to the track record of Founders Fund, always just what the founder wants.
Right.
For that situation, it was much more of a personal thing where it was very clear that the reason Google wanted Path, wasn't the product, as you said. There wasn't much there yet. Now, of course, it's doing extremely well. They really wanted Dave, and this was basically a very expensive employment contract that was going to be very beneficial to the other people who were in Path. But Dave, unequivocally didn't want to do it. Not only was it not the role he saw for himself, but very likely he would have basically been competing against Facebook and helping them develop their social products. And I can't imagine any early Facebook person that would be thrilled about doing that.
Thrilled because they thought they couldn't compete, or thrilled because of friendships and not wanting to?
Well, just nobody wants to kind of destroy the thing they work to build, right? Like, in as much as you view that as sort of a zero-sum market, then you're just working against your past self, and if you're mission-oriented, what's the point of doing that? So to me, it just looked like basically indentured servitude almost, and I saw no sort of ethical quandary or irrational risk taking to turn that down. The only thing that well, I won't talk about that piece.
Well, my next question might anticipate what you're going to say. I guess the question is, there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience. Is the founder always right if he doesn't want to sell? I experienced this acutely at TechCrunch because I didn't want TechCrunch to sell to AOL at all. But Mike had spent 5 years building that company, and I'd seen what he had gone through to build it. And at the end of the day, he was right, even though I think most of the staff did not want that to happen.
I haven't thought too hard about that. I mean, I'm certain there are cases when they're wrong. But, you know, I think, I hope I don't eat my words on this later, but to, you know, to some extent, acquisition is, you know, a sign that the company's on a bad trajectory. There are exceptions, so without naming names, I do think there are a lot of good cases where there's just an enormous synergy. It makes a lot of sense. Peter actually talked about PayPal and eBay in this way, and of course he's right. Like, you know, especially if you have that much sort of overlap on your revenue streams, and there, you know, if the sum of the parts is going to be greater, then go for it. But I do think a lot of the acquisitions that are happening are more, you know, basically life rafts for teams that have gotten sort of to the end of a run, and you know, it makes sense. It makes sense there. But yeah, but if the founder thinks that there's still a business to be built, then 9 times out of 10, I'm probably going to support them and keep going.
So let's talk about you deciding to leave Facebook. I mean, you just got done telling us that there was no hesitation in turning down $1 billion because the mission of building Facebook was so important.
Yep.
But you're not at the company anymore. Was there a point where you felt the mission was accomplished enough, or did you just get seduced by a new mission?
That's a bit of a leading question. No, I certainly don't think the mission is done enough. I do think my part in it had changed, and you know, the story of Asana is basically, you know, that for the last year and a half I was at Facebook, I was working basically 100% of my time on internal communication tools, and part of the precursor to Asana is actually a task manager that I built for Facebook that gained ubiquitous adoption there and is still the thing that basically runs the company today. And so for me, the thought process was, you know, I'd gotten to a place where I believed that building these tools was the most impactful thing I could do for Facebook. But I also believed there were other companies with important missions, and the tools were applicable to more than just Facebook. And finally, I could do a better job building them with a team dedicated to that purpose. So I was literally, you know, one guy with kind of like half another engineer helping me, and we were iterating on this tool, and it was very specialized to Facebook, so you could cut a lot of corners, didn't need to scale. But ultimately, it was limited, and the feature request list was just growing out in front of us, and was, you know, never actually going to be accomplished with just a few people working on it. And so I thought, well, you know, maybe it makes sense for Facebook to go into this product category and put a real engineering team on it and productize it, but you know, very quickly decided that didn't make sense, and was just mission creep for them, and Mark agreed 100%. So once I got to the end of that sort of reasoning, you know, it basically just became you know, something we needed to do, that, you know, Justin and I needed to sort of, you know, manifest this vision in the outer world. So, you know, every time somebody asks me, you know, why did you leave Facebook, they often sort of have these ideas built up in their head of, you know, maybe there were tensions, or maybe you didn't like it anymore, maybe it was a big company.
There's a big rumor that it was Cheryl.
We
should clear that up on stage.
Yeah, it wasn't Cheryl.
Because she happened to come in at the same time. And
yeah, Cheryl hates that rumor, by the way.
Yeah, because Dustin is like one of the most beloved people at Facebook, and I mean, it was a company that had a lot of tension and a lot of sort of warring factions at different points. But you were always the guy everyone liked, so it did not look good that Cheryl ousted you.
Yeah. Just poor timing on her part, honestly. So just to finish the thought, you know, people, there are a lot of these possible answers, and the only one that I ever give, and the only one I think is true, is that I left Facebook to start Asana, and that's what I'm still doing.
How did you tell Mark?
Yeah, you know, there's no easy way to get that message across. I just, you know, called a one-on-one, basically, you know, and sort of worked out what I was going to say, and asked Annika's assistant to find some time for me, and then had that difficult conversation.
Were you nervous?
Yeah, of course. It's yeah, I mean, that was certainly you know, one of the hardest things I've ever done.
What did he say?
You know, he was he was disappointed, but I think he took it really well, and said he was going to support me in the next step.
We're going to move on from Facebook in just a bit, but we talked, maybe it was about a year ago. I think I was hugely pregnant at the time, so that's how I tend to mark things that have happened in the last year. And I think you said that there's more people at Facebook now that weren't there when you were there, or at the whole company than you were there, or something like that. I mean, you had some figure for how much it's grown since you left and how much it's still growing.
Yeah, no, quite a bit. This was a year ago, and I probably said the company was at least twice as big as it was when I left, and now it's probably three or four times as big even. I've only even been to the 1601 California campus twice, and I've never even been to the new campus. So, to me, Facebook is still the sort of segmented set of buildings on University Ave, and that's how I think. Is that
intentionally? You don't want to go to the new campus?
I
know you're busy, but
I'm not like avoiding it. No, yeah, it's just I don't know. I guess I would have to just pick a date and decide that's what I was doing that day. But I don't have any other reason to go, I guess.
Right.
Ironically, Carrie went recently, so she's seen it, and I haven't yet. But yeah, they haven't been there very long, and opportunity hasn't come up. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll go down there for IPO day.
So it's not that you want it to stay in those buildings on University.
Yeah, no, I mean, I enjoyed the visits I had at 1601. It is a little funny because the security team doesn't know who I am, so I always have to wait at the front. Those
people should be fired.
Annika usually comes and gets me, or one of the early people is like, "What the heck's going on here?" But yeah,
that's awesome. So, what are your thoughts on Google Plus?
Thought you said you weren't going to ask about that.
Because Dustin, your co-founder, came from Google.
It's true.
Do you guys ever have fights about it?
Oh no, I mean, Justin worked at Facebook for 3 years as well, so he
bleeds.
Yeah, he believes very strongly in Facebook, and I think he actually laments the fact that they're working on that, and feels it's sort of outside of their sweet spot and a distraction from their core competency and their mission.
There's no big add to Circles?
There's no big what?
Add to Circles?
What do you mean?
You didn't look at Google Plus and think, Circles, we should have had Circles.
Oh, well, there were friend lists, actually. They just, they were just implemented in a somewhat different way and adopted less. And I actually was a huge fan of the feature when we introduced it, and was sort of dismayed when the users didn't really engage with it, and we kind of let it drift. And so Circles to me was, great, because I was like, oh, well, this will bring the idea back. And to some extent, the lighter weight groups are a similar concept. So no, I definitely think that's sort of the best part about it. But I think Facebook had the idea first.
Do you think that social is over? Do you think there can ever be a Facebook killer?
Social as a market. I mean, clearly Facebook will still be social and be a big part of that.
Right, no, as in they've won, not over as like Google sort of won search.
I think I've got to deflect this one too. So I told Sarah at the beginning, just so you guys know.
He can say anything that looks like he's pumping up the stock.
Yeah, so I'm not a Facebook insider like Peter. I'm not banned from saying the word Facebook, but I just want to avoid anything that might give you information about the stock price.
So when are you planning on selling? No, just kidding.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit more about Asana. So you talked about sort of this mission to leave. When you guys left to do Asana, it's very sexy now to be doing what people are calling enterprise, but it's really even small business to business, mm-hmm. or to big business. But it was not something that was considered sexy then.
Right.
Did people think you were crazy to do this? Did you think you were a little bit crazy? Did you know anything about selling to businesses?
Let me answer those in order. Did I know anything about selling to businesses? No, definitely not. Luckily, that's not what we do at Asana. So what we think we're doing differently and why we think enterprise can be sexy is we actually have we have a bottoms-up distribution model. So we have a free product. Teams with less than 30 can organize in a workspace. It's a full-featured product. People get a ton of value out of it. And then we upsell larger teams into premium functionality and larger workspaces. And we think that basically the reason enterprise software is so bad is expressly because people have been selling to businesses and not the individuals inside those businesses that actually have to use the product. So CIOs and executives at these companies end up making a decision that's largely based on a checklist of functionality and sort of making sure they're spending that part of the budget in the right way, and they don't actually care not nearly as much as they should about how effective it is at improving their business. And certainly not about the usability of the product and how it feels. When you're actually trying to distribute the product by getting individuals in the company to use it, you have to care about those things. You have to build a high quality product that people love to use, that they're using every day. And as a result, our engagement and adoption metrics look a lot more like a consumer app. And if from the few bits of information I've learned about some of the more classic enterprise apps, you hear some of the retention numbers and your jaw drops. It's like, oh my God, like almost nobody's using that. Some of these companies are still making a ton of revenue because the companies are paying for a lot of licenses to these products, but they just go unused. So to us, the only reason enterprise isn't sexy is entirely about how the product's been sold in the past. So from that light, the fact that we don't know how to sell to businesses is actually a pro. So until you kind of have that realization in our book or belief in other people's books, then you might think we're crazy to go into that sector. But to us, it's a really important mission. Everybody we know that we talk to about the pain we're trying to solve just immediately resonates with it. Regardless of what industry you're in, or even if you're not employed, frankly, people really understand the pain of trying to collaborate on a project and keep people on the same page. So when we first started pitching the company, we immediately sort of we got the validation that this is an important problem. This is going to be something people care about if we get it right. And we felt like we had the product that got it right.
And the getting it right part is really the hard part, because billions have been spent by companies on tools that promise to do these things. And so you're going into a market where people are a little jaded that anyone's going to get this right.
It's true.
What is your insight where you are fundamentally nailing it, where billions and billions of dollars have failed?
Yeah. So there's three key differentiators for Asana. One of them is just speed, and we don't mean the latency to the server and how long it takes us to load pages in the app. There's actually just one page load for Asana, and then you have the app loaded much more like a desktop app. But then everything you do in the app has been designed to just be as frictionless and lightweight as possible, so that you can the information can be recorded in the system at the rate that you actually think. So most of the actions you take in Asana are actually completely non-blocking, not just Ajax, but you do things and the app responds immediately, and just in the background it's sort of syncing things back with the server. And the result of this is it doesn't feel like it's something that's in your way. So the second differentiator, which is very related to this one, is it's the thing that people use to organize themselves. So with traditional task management software, what you actually see is all of the individual contributors actually have something they're using to keep track of their tasks. They've got a Vim file or an Emacs file if they're a developer. They've got sticky notes on their monitor, or if they're like the vast majority of people in the world, they just kind of leave things in their email inbox. And when you archive it or reply, then that's when the task is complete. And then there's a secondary system that the project manager uses, or the product manager, and that's actually not the source of truth of the data, right? They're actually sort of going around every week and sort of guilt tripping people into, can you please put this information in the project management system? Can you please put it on the wiki? And the effect of this is you can never trust the data. It's not what the person is actually working on. It's just the latest copy that has been made. And that really cripples the vast majority of these pieces of software. And then the third thing that we think of is really the secret sauce of the product design is this sort of balance we've found between being highly structured and being completely unstructured that gives you a ton of versatility. So on the one hand, when you look at these apps, on one extreme you have very niche products that implement a very specific methodology like Agile or Scrum. And perhaps for a specific vertical, a lot of the task managers that are most popular are actually specifically for software development. And these work really well for the projects that you want to use in that method and the things that fit into that model. But as soon as you want to break out of it, you're stuck. You have to go into something else. And people try very hard to not be stuck. I hear stories all the time about people who track tasks and bug trackers, even though a bunch of the fields don't make sense and things like this. But ultimately, it ends up being really cumbersome. And then on the other hand, you have completely unstructured things, which is actually what most of the world does. They use Google Docs or a master spreadsheet that's your task list. And these are great because you can implement any process on it. But you're losing all of the power of having structured data, of having a database, of being able to search it in smart ways, of being able to have different views for, on the one hand, the project team when they're in their team meeting, and the other hand, the individual when they just want to look at the list of the tasks assigned to them. And Asana has really found a sweet spot in between these extremes that gives you all of that power without losing the flexibility. And so when we see companies adopt, they end up using Asana for every part of their business and for all sorts of things you wouldn't even think of using task management software for. And that just makes it much more powerful.
So how's it going so far?
Really great. We launched as you said, we had a bit longer of sort of a prelude to the beta, and a lot of that was we were building a core technology, Luna, that allows us to implement a UI that has the speed that I was talking about, and we always saw that from the very beginning as critical. If it was too much friction, wouldn't.
You still think
work.
that was the right move?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's paid off in spades now. I think our app among HTML sites is really one of a kind. So we spent a full year developing that technology. We spent another full year in a private beta iterating towards an MVP. And as you said, there's been a lot of products before this, so people had very high expectations and very sort of high requirements for something they were willing to invest so much of their life into. And then in November we launched, got enormously positive response, especially in the Valley. Just a ton of companies have gotten ramped up. We now have teams from Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, RDO, some teams from Quora, and it's just been really great seeing them get ramped up on the product. And just last week actually we announced our commercial product for the first time. So before we were marketing, just to these, smaller teams, the product was working really well for them, and now we feel we've gotten into a place where it really works at scale and works for much larger teams. And the response from that has been, gigantic. In the past 2 weeks, we've grown as much as we've grown in the past, 2 or 3 months even, and just seeing, a ton of companies that are like, okay, great, like it looks like other companies are finding a lot of success with this. We can too.
So how many customers do you have now? How many users? What can you tell us number-wise?
So when we first launched the product in November, we had a couple hundred teams in that private beta representing thousands of users, and now we've got tens of thousands of active workspaces.
Wow. So how do you calibrate success at Asana? Because there's probably a lot of people who think no matter what you do, you're not going to ever eclipse Facebook.
Well, I feel like those are two different questions. We certainly, I don't know if I would say it's calibrating success. I mean, we really do think of Asana as having a similarly scoped mission, and in some ways, it doesn't need to necessarily have the reach on a population basis as Facebook does. But I think there's a plausible argument that it will one day as the sort of market of knowledge workers expands and takes on more of the economy. But it's a really big business idea. It's something, like I said, it's a universal pain, and it's something that just there hasn't been progress in almost 2 decades. Really since email in changing the way that groups communicate. But it's super important. So if we can crack that nut, we absolutely think it's a $100 billion business or whatever price you might think Facebook is worth right
now. How long do you think it takes? Enterprise usually takes a long time.
Yeah, it does definitely take longer, but hopefully not too long. I mean, like I said, we're trying to approach this with a very different model, and we've even got a lot of aspects of the product that are sort of inherently viral, and there's frankly, just the media works very differently now and can spread our message very quickly. And the companies that are adopting are extremely enthusiastic. If you look at our Twitter stream, you just see over and over again people who say it's revolutionized their business and are basically doing our marketing for us. So I think if the market were to recognize the value of this product, it could happen very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me. I want to talk a little bit about founder dynamics because you've been a co-founder with 2 different companies and
Sure.
2 very interesting personalities with both of those companies. Is there a similar dynamic between you and Justin that there was between you and Mark?
There's definitely some similarities. I think in both cases, we really complement each other well. Mm-hmm. I think both Justin and Mark are very much sort of big product thinkers and big idea people, and I think Sean has said this of himself before, but it applies to both of them. They sort of just like think of the world as it's going to be 10 years from now, but that's actually just the assumptions they make about how it's operating today, and
right.
Allows them to sort of produce these elaborate product visions. And I'm much more of a focused operator type and can kind of get the business done, get the thing built, and make sure we don't drop any balls. And those pairings worked really well. Peter also mentioned that just like the common trajectory for these successful startups is to have 2 founders instead of 1, and he said something along the lines of that way they can kind of like bounce ideas off each other and keep things a little bit in checks, just like end up on some random path. And that's definitely the role I play for Justin.
Where would he be? What planet would he be on now without you?
Yeah. But I always feel bad because you never know the counterfactual. I may have just been holding them both back all this time.
I'm sure that's not the case. So what is your advice for someone who's in college who has a good idea for a business who just doesn't know if they're onto something or not? Because not everything is going to obviously be Facebook. Very, very few things are going to be Facebook. Mm-hmm. How does someone know if they're onto something? How does someone know if they should drop out of school and take the risk that you guys did?
How does somebody know if they're onto something? I almost want to say if you're unsure, you probably aren't. At least in Facebook's case, it was just very, very obvious. And I think in Asana's case, it's very, very obvious. It's maybe not as certain that we'll be the ones who win, but it is certain that there's an important market here, and we've stumbled onto the important pieces of it. Yeah, I think you just have to believe so much in your idea that the alternative just is unfathomable. You have to manifest it. And if you're thinking, well, staying in school sounds nice too, then you should probably stay in school, and maybe a better idea will come along later. And I do think there's talked about this before, but I think there are a lot of people who are sort of arriving at the idea, first that they want to be an entrepreneur and that they want to drop out of school maybe, and
right.
Then they go looking for the idea, and I think that almost never works out. I really think the only reason you should become an entrepreneur is because that's the only way the idea will come into the world.
So what do you think about now Y Combinator now accepts people who are just great people and they'll figure out the idea later?
Yeah, I think that's really wrong. Well, yeah, I mean, I would just say one more thing on that. I mean, it's not just bad for that person. They might be wasting some of their time, but I actually think it's really bad for the ecosystem where there's a lot of really great people, and instead of joining and working on one of the bigger projects like Facebook or Dropbox or Core, or one of these companies that is already sort of proven an idea and an engineer is very clearly leveraged. They're instead sort of chasing something that doesn't exist yet. And I think this is rational in a lot of ways, but especially from a financial perspective, where it's really clear from where we're sitting now that the 100th engineer at Facebook did way better than the vast majority of even really good entrepreneurs in the Valley.
Right. I just want to talk about a couple more things, and then I want to open it up for questions. So there's a microphone there, and I believe there's one in the back of the room. If some people want to start making their way to them, that would be awesome.
I should say, by the way, did really well financially and had more impact, which is actually the part I think is more important.
Right. So one question that we like to ask people, that Peter does too, is what's the one thing you believe that no one else believes? What is it for you?
Yeah, I thought about this.
You knew it was coming, I know.
Yeah. I didn't necessarily come
This is the
up
problem
with
with actually live streaming this talk.
Yeah. Didn't necessarily come up with too many great answers, but the ones that will at least be the most controversial. One is, like Bill Gates, I really believe that, nuclear power generation is a necessary part of our future. And I think that's pretty contrarian among a lot of, especially environmental activists. And I actually just have come to really feel like that as long as it can be done safely, that's actually going to be the thing that's going to be by far the cleanest environmentally and the most sustainable. And part of this is just an assumption that we will have very big power consumption needs and ever increasing. And I think that trying to match renewable energy with sort of conservation and trying to cull back some of the energy use, it seems like a losing proposition to me.
I also want to talk about what you're doing with philanthropy. Sure. You and your fiance are working on a foundation, and in the past in Silicon Valley, certainly in the late 1990s, there were a lot of people who made a lot of money, but either kind of just didn't know where to start with philanthropy because it happened to them so quickly and they weren't sort of born into this society, family money, or they just, they felt like kind of the Warren Buffett thing of, I'm smarter at managing this money until I'm 90 and it'll be even bigger. And then, when I'm one foot in the grave, I'll have more to give you. How did you think about getting so active in it so early?
Yeah, this is actually a great follow-on to the last question, because the only other answer I was considering saying is that I believe poverty is a solvable problem and that it'll be solved in the very near term. And that's basically the answer to why get started now.
Near term meaning?
30 years. So, why get started now? The answer is basically if you can find quality ways to apply the capital against the problem, the good it does also compounds. If you actually can get people to a level of sustainability, those communities can thrive, and then you don't need more money later on to help the people, a larger population of people that have grown up in poverty. And then the other answer is I'm fortunate enough to have a really great partner in Carrie that's able to think about this full time. And is more than qualified to do it. It's just brilliant, probably smarter than me in a lot of ways, and that allows us that allows me to focus on Asana while we also learn about this. And another important part of it is just we basically intend to fully spend the capital, and when you're thinking about giving away money at that kind of volume, you need to start learning now.
Right.
It'll take us a decade just to get to sort of full capacity.
What do you mean you intend to fully spend the capital?
As in, I don't intend to amass capital and then leave it to another generation. I expect not to have it by the time we get to the end of our lives.
Wow, that's a lot of capital out there.
Yes.
More in a few weeks.
Yes.
All right, let's take a few questions. Oh, sorry, I have one more just before you guys go. I heard from Kim, who's our video producer, who used to be at Forbes, that you recently you flew to meet with Bill Gates, and then you were flying back, and there was a Forbes reporter there, and she saw you in line to check in Virgin America and Coach.
That's right.
Do you still fly Coach?
I do as often as possible. It's funny. This came up on Facebook. Somebody was kind of commenting on, Mark plays it both ways. He leads this really austere life, but he also flies in a private jet. And one of the Facebook employees commented, "Oh, this is actually like a security concern, and he needs to do that, and it would be fiscally irresponsible not to." And I thought that was pretty insightful and something I'm thinking about more now. But luckily, my security needs are much less than Mark's, and hasn't been a problem. And I specifically said, the article specifically said, I fly Coach on Virgin, which I consider to be as good as first class on most of the other airlines.
Paul Caro's girlfriend is a flight attendant on Virgin, so I'll have to ask her to start eavesdropping on your conversations and get some news.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to some questions. Go ahead.
Hi. So I would like to know what are the biggest differences and the challenges by working in a consumer-focused company and a business-focused company that we're working now with Asana?
Sure. One thing I always like to point out is we try to ignore the fact that we're an enterprise company, and as much as we can, treat it like a consumer company. So we get to have some sort of willful dissonance at times, but also just get to make it feel a lot more like a consumer company. And one of the most important ways is that people we know are actually using the product, and I think that's often a challenge for the other enterprise companies. I've talked to a lot of people. They have trouble recruiting because engineers don't want to work on a product that is going to end up serving a finance team in some big company, and they can't identify with the user at all. And so that's typically a challenge for sure. For us, there are certainly many challenges. I think we tell this story about people we know are using it. We like to say enterprise customers are really consumers at work, but it's still a challenge for us to actually get that across. And I think the most common way we lose candidates ourselves is either they want to start a company or they want to join one of the consumer companies because they feel like they identify with that better. There's also just much higher expectations from your customers when this is really driving their business. If it goes down, that's a gigantic problem for them. You need to have extremely good stability. Yeah. I'll think about that. Maybe I'll add another one.
All right, we're going to go over here now.
Okay.
Hi, Dustin. Quick question. So since I'm limited to just one question, I just want to know, at Burning Man, we had a cooler, and apparently you were pegged as the one who stole it and left with it. So we just want to know, when we could expect to get it back, or if you'll be at the next one.
He's about to come into some money. I don't know if...
Yeah, I guess.
I think you can afford a cooler. Did you steal the cooler?
Yeah, apparently.
What color was it?
It was white. It was a white one.
But were you in our camp, or like?
No. You. I guess you came over to our camp and
did you go steal a cooler?
I don't know what to say. That seems implausible to me.
It's a good story. Dustin Moskovitz stole our cooler.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
All right. What was your one major takeaway or lesson from Facebook that has influenced your actions with your current venture?
I think the most important one, I think, is being extremely mission oriented and in a focused way. The thing that I think is best about Facebook is basically that they all build one product, and the whole company is aligned towards that single mission, and it really just permeates everywhere through the culture, and I think makes them a lot better at it. They enjoy it a lot more. Makes for a better company.
Right. Over here.
Hi, I'm David Murphy, founder of Telegram. And first of all, congratulations, Sarah, for what you put together. I've come up here from LA for this. It's awesome.
Thanks
And Dustin, just wanted to ask you, I saw you invested in Nation Builder last month. Are you going to be doing a lot more angel investing perhaps after the IPO as well?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, actually. So I don't do very much angel investing at all. I actually have a side fund, or sort of an angel fund that Dave Morin manages called Slow Ventures. And it's actually Slow Ventures that did the investment in Nation Builder, and people kind of figured out who the people behind it were. And that's the vast majority of investments that I think of mine are really teams I've never met, products I haven't evaluated. Dave's really managing that. The only exceptions are people I have a very close existing relationship with. Invested in Quora, invested in Cove, which sold to Dropbox. Invested in Path, of course. So those are, and basically my thought process there is I'm going to be talking to them and advising them about their companies anyway. May as well be a part of it. I really intend to be focused 110% on Asana and don't intend to, sort of be taking a lot of pitches or anything like that.
So why do this side fund? Just because you want to give back some to entrepreneurs? I mean, a lot of times angels are involved because they want to be mentors and they want to...
Yeah, I mean, partially, it's fun to, be able to be a part of some of these other things. I think going into it, I thought I might be a little more involved than I am in practice. It's also just nice for companies I do want to support that aren't my very closest friends. I can just introduce them to Dave, and often they're people I've met a bunch of times already and have some sort of relationship with, and I'm able to just say, I'm not an angel investor, but this is a fund that would it'd be good for you to have.
And how big is it?
It's very small. It's just like $1 million in management or something.
That's big for me, by the way.
Yeah, but by VC standards, it's small, and it's more than just Dave and I. It's actually like 6 people. So
interesting. But you're the only LP, or does
no,
everyone put the money in it?
It's everybody puts money into it, and Dave does all the hard work. It's a really great situation for us, really.
Wow. He also has a job.
I know. I really don't know how he does it. I'm really shocked at the number of deals he's been able to do so far.
How many deals have they done?
Oh, I don't know the number offhand, but something like 15 to 20.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. Good question. I knew none of that.
That's a lot of deals. Greg Gottman, Angel Hack. Nice to meet you, Dustin. I can attest that you do ride Coach because you met one of my best friends a couple of years ago on Coach, which he still talks about.
Did he steal anything?
Not that I've heard of, but I mean, it's a plane ride. Peanuts. Tell us about your API and how you see that accelerating your growth in Asana.
Sure. Yeah. So, part of the other news for Asana is right before the commercial launch, we opened up our REST API for the first time, and that's the beginning of a much longer platform vision. But where we see it helping in the short term is basically so that companies can do a better job integrating with their other workflows, integrating with other tools. One of the funny things about task management is most other enterprise apps have a little task manager built in. So if you use like a code review tool, for example, people are sending you diffs to review. If you're using like a sort of HR review system, you've got to do like your peer reviews and stuff, and you end up with kind of a queue of these things to do. And I think there are a lot of really natural integrations with Asana where instead of them wholly implementing a new task manager, they can just generate tasks through our API. And you can end up with a really close relationship between the two products.
Do you see that building onto like some kind of like social graph of like different project managers working with each other on different things from different companies and like maybe collaboration like that?
I do see that. I think even just parts of the product enable that without having to leverage the API. We have guest accounts. It's really easy to create a project that's shared with people outside your organization. So, for example, we have a set of projects that we organize with our PR firm, and it's just like very natural collaboration. But certainly the API will help in as much as there are just other tools involved in getting your work done.
Right.
Hi, Dustin. My name is Nitin Bansal, and I'm a co-founder with svangelconnect.com, which is an incubator for companies in the different geos. My question to you is like, what brings the startups to Silicon Valley despite a high tax rate, and especially for companies like yours, like Asana and all, which are very well established and they don't need any more investors? So what makes you stick to this place rather than going to a low tax place like Nevada or Texas or even going offshore?
Yeah, there's I think a really easy answer to that, which is just the talent pool here is unprecedented. It's just an enormous concentration of very bright minds, and that creates a positive feedback loop that's going to keep going, where more smart people want to come here because there are other smart people. I also just personally really love California and think it's beautiful here and want to live here for my entire life. So I couldn't imagine moving to another state to optimize for taxes.
Go ahead.
Hey, Dustin. There seem to be a number of companies that are approaching this collaboration space from like different beachheads. Mm-hmm. So Box from Files, say Yammer from social, Asana from task management. Do you think they're all kind of headed into the same thing and they're going to start entering each other's markets? Do you think they're going to start competing with each other as they all start to do each other's features?
It's an interesting question. There's sort of a short-run answer and a long-run answer. The long-run answer is, you can divide the world up into several large markets, enterprise and social and maybe mobile or something like that. And on a long enough time frame, if the companies get big enough, inevitably they compete. In the short run, I think of those as very different services. We actually, we have a Dropbox team account that we use very regularly and has a pretty distinct, distinct purpose from what we use Asana for, and we're considering, doing integrations with some of those services, and get asked by our users all the time, and we really think of them as complementary.
Hi, I'm Chris Anderson, co-founder of Breezy. My question is, you were talking about how to make the enterprise space more sexy, and I was flipping the sales user acquisition model on its head, going from the bottom up. And I thought of Yammer, and I was just curious early on if there are other companies or companies that you look to now that are doing that really well, or how you plan on really accelerating that with Asana.
Yeah, companies that are doing that well. I think Dropbox is a good example.
Atlassian. I don't think they have any salespeople, and they're looking towards going public soon.
They have no salespeople, really?
None.
They must have some.
None at all. I've looked for them. They tell me they don't. I've scoured the company.
That's a great example. SurveyMonkey's often brought up in this context, and I think the really big example is Google Apps, where Gmail is the product that hundreds of millions of, maybe it's not quite that high, but it's pretty high, hundreds of millions of consumers use, and that's a lead-in for their enterprise products. That's certainly how we purchased it.
Okay, great.
Hi, I'm Chloe, and I use Asana with my startup, and several other startups I know have tried out Asana, and none of us are a very big fan. And so I've been wondering, is there a tipping point, do you feel, in the team size that leads to a greater adoption or to retention on the usage of your product? Because my team's like 4 people, and I know other teams that are quite small, and most of them are not totally extremely enthusiastic, although everybody was dying to try it. And I just wondered if there was like a tipping point and how you figure out which customers really like adopt it heavily and become, fanatical about it, and which ones sort of drop out.
I have many questions about your organization that would make me able to answer that easier. But I don't think we found, any sort of magic sweet spot. There are plenty of teams that are only 2 people that are, really, really huge evangelists of the product. There are actually plenty of people who use it individually, just as a personal task manager. I probably would have guessed that a 4-person team, would absolutely find success. But yeah, I'd be curious to learn more about where it's failing you, or what you're doing now instead.
Can you say in like a sentence what you wish it did that it didn't do?
I think the UI could be made easier. I think it can be a little bit complicated as far as adding projects and assigning tasks, especially if you're within the project, to just be able to add a task faster. and keep it within that same field instead of having to continually choose, or if you could add like pre-population of guessing that I tend to assign this team member who's a developer this code task, and so I don't have to always pick every other field. The other thing would be awesome if there was either Dropbox integration or an integration where I can assign like a file location or URL to this asset that I'm uploading, so that I'm not constantly like putting things in multiple places and then also having to re-upload the asset. I can't really share things easily with my team, and I think that's the hardest part about it is like, you know, we might assign a to-do item in there, but we still have to share everything else everywhere else. Does that make sense?
Except until the very last part.
Okay, so it's like if I could at least just even assign like here's the file, but I don't. If I upload it to Asana, I mean I can write it as a note, but it'd be a little bit easier if it was integrated stronger, so that like someone could just follow the file path and it was, you know.
Yeah. So I mean, a lot of what you described is our future roadmap. You know, certainly we think a lot about making it easier to use and getting people, you know, to be able to ease into the product, you know, faster. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the, unfortunately, like a lot of the things you described, I do know I know ways you can use the product that will feel a lot quicker for you. I won't get into them now, but basically I think the lesson is we need to expose those and make them more obvious for users.
Man, she's wearing a Path shirt. I thought this was like a plant of yours in the audience who was going to ask a really nice question, and she's asked the hardest question. All right.
Yeah, definitely not a plant.
I got an easier.
Can we get one of our customers that love us up here now? In fact, I know there's at least one in the audience. So
how are you so awesome?
Can you find him?
I got an easier question. My name is Wen. I'm wondering if you have a view on pre-IPO trading on platforms like SharesPost or Second Market and how that affects the industry.
Any particular aspect, or just well, you think about that in general?
I mean, obvious. Facebook was one of the, you know, the company that sort of redefined secondary markets, early liquidity for employees. So it must have affected.
Yeah, you know, I think like many things, it has pros and cons. You know, I think there's a lot of value in you know, finding ways to get early liquidity for employees that have been with a company for a long time, especially if you're going to be on like a Facebook length IPO track. And you know, in some ways, it helps with, you know, the golden handcuffs problem, and people can leave when they want to. And I think that's absolutely what should happen. You know, nobody should be working at a company just because they're stuck there financially. But at the same time, it's sort of a version 0, and I think it's a bit of a, you know, elephant in a china shop, or mixing metaphors. Bulls, yeah.
It would also be bad if an elephant were in a china shop.
Yeah, that would be much worse, frankly. And it causes a lot of complications for companies, especially around you know, fair market value pricing of their stock, and that is materially bad for the companies and for the other employees of the company in many cases, and you know, causes a ton of friction.
Do you have restrictions around if people are able, like how do you plan on doing it differently with Asana? Do you plan on doing it differently? Not allowing people to trade stocks, any other rules you would put in place that Facebook didn't?
Can I get a sidebar to see if I should answer that question? We have some restrictions in place, yeah, and I think that's gonna basically become the standard. I do think, you know, like I said, I think liquidity is important for employees, and companies should take measures to make sure that's available, but at the same time, they should also take measures to control how that happens.
Okay. Do we have one more question?
Hi.
We have one more guy here. Maybe two more, and then I have a couple more, and then we'll let this guy go.
Lucky me. JPAP from Snappy Labs. One of the things that I was really intrigued by, Dustin, was when you said that you were in a private beta for a full 12 months and another year of development before that, so really a 12-month cycle, which I guess is typical for a lot of enterprise development. But you contrast that with what Facebook's been doing. In some sense, there's been a conscious effort to break things, to release on a more rigorous and faster time cycle. And really, Facebook was consumer, and now you're all about enterprise. Do you see a convergence with enterprise and consumer where there's a really quick turnaround where you're incorporating user feedback like what you got tonight in some sense more quickly? Because enterprise has been typically this long time cycle, this long investment, whereas consumers been trying to get a big user grab as quickly as possible.
Yeah, so I'm glad I get the chance to clarify this, but at Asana we push code every day. The same was true in the private beta, so the people that were there were getting very high response from us, and it was just a question of when we wanted to expose the product to a larger group of people. And a lot of that to us was just, we knew that we would get, I think Asana was special in this way, but we knew we were going to get a lot more attention than, some other startup that was introducing a product would on their first day. So it was really important to us that we didn't squander that opportunity and made sure that we had a product that was going to have high retention and high adoption, and we were able to measure that in the private beta. But we produce product very, very rapidly. We actually, in the past 3 weeks, have done, I think, 4 major product releases, and we actually have 3 more on deck that are really going to change the product and make it a lot better, that are going to happen in the next 4 or 5 weeks. And I don't think there are any other enterprise software companies that move that quickly.
Great. All right, last question.
I kind of have a follow-up question in that regard. So about engineering, software engineering, and culture of software engineers. I think Facebook originally did not have a high reputation as being a, solid tech company as far as engineering goes. Like maybe it's a little flaky, right? And now it has I think a very high reputation. And it sounds like with Asana, you've kind of got that out of the gate. So from your perspective, I was curious about how you see engineers working with engineers. How do you actually build a team that can build that kind of software and actually make it solid? And there's a big difference between companies that do that well and companies that do not do that well.
Yeah, I think the answer is you do it very carefully and like I said, slowly. I think a large part of why I think Facebook had the bad reputation is frankly because I was the CTO at the beginning and didn't know how to program. And we made a lot of mistakes, and I think a lot of them can be traced directly back to me. We also, when we were first hiring, ended up hiring a lot of college students because those are the people that most loved the product, most wanted to work there. It was easy to hire them when you're a new company. They were cheaper to pay, and they were more inexperienced. They happened to also be phenomenally talented, and I think especially Matt Kohler gets credit for just immediately, especially engineers like 5 through 20 were just incredible. Like most of them have gone on to are either directors of engineering at Facebook now or have started their own companies, and they just needed a few years of experience to become a top team, but they had the talent. And with Asana, it's just about having the will and being very careful with every single hire. We probably interview about 50 engineers before we make an offer. And that takes a lot of discipline. We have to put a lot of time into it and make sure that the ones that join the team are, at the right bar. And then we put a lot of time into making them successful once they get there.
Okay. What do you think was your biggest contribution at Facebook? If you feel like you weren't the ideal CTO, which is, I assume, being somewhat self-deprecating. There are many good things you did. But overall, looking back on it, I know Peter told me that when he first met with Mark, and they signed the funding paperwork, and they kind of shook hands afterwards. Peter's advice for Mark was, just don't fuck it up.
Okay.
I think it's safe to say he didn't, but how did you help him just not fuck it up?
Yeah, I think it just goes back to what we were talking about with the founder dynamics, where, I'm just really good at tracking a lot of details and making sure that we have consistent progress and consistent quality across the board. Well, maybe not quality in the very beginning, but just making sure that all of the things happen. Like I really do feel like, especially in the first 6 months, if I wasn't the one doing it, we weren't going to expand. And so that was probably my biggest contribution is just pushing it, I guess.
All right, 2 final questions. I don't know if you remember, but the night that you saw the Facebook movie, I ran into you at the Homestead because I live in the Mission and you work in the Mission.
Yes, right.
And you had just seen the movie, and I hadn't seen it yet, but I definitely heard a lot of hand-wringing about it from people at Facebook. And you seem much less angsty than a lot of people that I talked to. And it occurred to me that of everything that was being said about the movie, you were really one of the only people, or maybe the only person that actually was there from dorm room through it becoming a real company, right? Other than Mark? Other than Mark.
Sure.
So, and you're, outside the company at this point. You don't necessarily have, shareholder pressure to have an image for the company. So it occurred to me you were probably the most unbiased person who actually was there, who could actually say, how flawed was this movie? And you had a good sense of humor about it at the time. So I asked you, okay, so what percentage inaccurate was it? Was it maybe 75% accurate and inaccurate? And you laughed and you said, oh, it's 95% complete bullshit.
Yeah.
What was the thing when you watched the movie that just galled you the most? Or you just thought was like unnecessarily inaccurate? I mean, other than the fact that you were barely in the movie.
I have a very clear answer to that, which is basically the motivation they gave Mark of like, showing up this girl who had scorned him, and he was presented as this totally unlovable character that was never going to get a girlfriend again in the future, and all of this was about sort of reconciling that in his identity, and that was just horribly unfair and horribly inaccurate. He started dating Priscilla, I think, before we started Facebook. It was like in between FaceMash and Facebook, and they've been, they're gonna get married now, and and it just seemed, a lot of the other sort of aspects of his personality, the way it was portrayed, were, derivations of that sort of characteristic, and just seemed really unfair. I mean, like I said, when you asked me about when I first met Mark, he's personable, he's likable. Yeah. He cracks jokes all the time, and just the sort of demonization, just I don't know, seemed to go sort of beyond poetic license.
Mm-hmm. Last question. This is what we always end with, so you may know it's coming.
I didn't watch the end, so I don't know.
Oh, thank God. So, what would be...
This is why I asked you how long it is. Just kept going.
I know, it does keep going. It does keep going. And yet, people are still here. In fact, I don't know what we're going to do next. We clearly have more people because we could barely walk to the stage. I don't know. I think there's going to be a double-decker here next month.
Yeah.
So, if you could have any mediocre superpower in the what would it be?
What are some examples? Yeah.
So Peter's was very good. So Amanda, our Pando List editor, who came up with this question, hers is that she wishes she would never be cold getting out of the shower. She really hates being cold out of the shower. Peter's was when he's 10 minutes from his office and late for a meeting, the ability to instantly beam into the office. I can't remember what Dave's was. Sorry. I don't think we'd come up with it by the time Dave did it.
Oh man, I'm sure.
Oh, we had a great one the other day on the site, which was, we do them for the people lists that we do. A guy said an ability to temporarily remove his arm while spooning with a girl.
There's a bed for that. You stick your arm in. This is really tricky. I'm sure I'm going to go home and immediately think of something really clever. Oh, man.
You're not leaving until you come up with something.
Oh, really?
You should have watched the whole Peter Thiel video.
Oh, man. This is difficult. Carrie, can you help me out on this one? What do I complain about a lot? Okay. That would be good. Oh, man.
I did notice when I was writing a post about you and I was looking for a picture, your hair is only 2 lengths. It is either here or it is...
Yeah, that's
I think this is a superpower.
It grows extremely fast. I mean, it is something that would be a big improvement on my life.
So just maybe constantly trimmed hair?
Yeah, but that sounds not good enough. One thing that's really just been annoying me lately, as much as I love California, I would really love the ability to turn off the wind sometimes. I commute to work on a bike and just, when it's cold and just super windy, you know how sometimes just the crazy gusts come up, it just really ruins my day. I get to work and like my rhythm's thrown off for the entire rest of the cycle.
All right, turning off the wind.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with that one, turning off the wind.
Part-time playing God with weather.
Just locally.
Yeah,
maybe
just,
like a giant bubble that could follow me around.
Right. That's mediocre in the grand sense of controlling the weather. I'll allow it. Okay, so next month we've got Ben Horowitz, which is your other investor. You've been sandwiched between Peter and Ben, your two investors.
They're both brilliant.
Yes, and what should we ask Ben? Because he won't watch till the end of yours.
What should you ask Ben? I'd love to hear him, talk more about the sort of bottoms-up enterprise sales distribution model. I think Ben, to some degree, is the contrarian among our advisors there. But I think there's just been sort of a ever-mounting body of evidence and in favor of a changing tide there, and I'd be interested to get his updated perspective.
Right. Will you actually watch? Will
yes,
you watch till the end?
I will definitely.
Do I have to hold that question till the end?
Yes.
All right. So next month we've got Ben Horowitz. We're also launching in New York later this month. So if you're going to be in New York, we would love for you to come there. If you're a season pass holder, we'll let you come for free to New York if you're in New York, or pass it to a friend. We'll have more on the site about that. And huge thanks to everyone for coming, and huge thanks to Dustin Moskovitz. You're done.